Chapter 6. With the Childlike People. Siddharth went to Kamaswamy, the merchant. He was directed into a rich house. Servants led him between the precious carpet into a chamber, where he awaited the master of the house. Kamaswamy entered, a swiftly, smoothly moving man with very grey hair, with very intelligent, cautious eyes, with a greedy mouth. Politely, the host and the guest greeted one another. "I've been told," the merchant began, "that you were a Brahmin and learned man, but that you seek to be in the service of a merchant. Might you have become destitute Brahmin, so that you seek to serve?" "No," said the Siddharth. "I have not become too destitute, and have never said been destitute. You should know that I am coming from the Samans, with whom I have lived for a long time. If you are coming from the Samans, how could you be anything but destitute? Aren't the Samans entirely without possessions?" "I am without possessions," said Siddharth. "If this is what you meant, surely I am without possessions, but I am so voluntarily, and therefore I am not destitute." "But what are you planning to live off without being possessions?" "I haven't thought of this yet, sir. For more than 3 years I have been without possessions and have never thought about of what I should live." "So you have lived of the possession of others." "Presumable this is how it is. After all, a merchant also lives of what other people own." "Well said. But he wouldn't take anything from another person for nothing. He would give his merchandise in return." "So it seems to be indeed. Everyone takes, everyone gives. Such is life. But if you don't mind me asking, without being possessions, what would you like to give?" "Everyone gives what he has. The warrior gives strength, the merchant gives merchandise, and teacher teachings, and farmers rice, the fisher fish." "Yes, indeed. And what it is now, what you have got to give? What is it that you have learned, what you are able to do?" "I can think, I can wait, I can fast. That's everything." "I believe that's everything." "And what's the use of that? For example, the fast." "It is very good, sir. When a person has nothing to eat, fasting is the smartest thing he could do. When, for example, Siddharth hadn't learned to fast, he would have to accept any kind of service before this day is up, whether it may be with you or wherever, because hunger would force him to do so. But like this, Siddharth can wait calmly. He knows no impatience, he knows no emergency. For a long time, he can allow hunger to besiege him and can laugh about it. This, sir, is what fasting is good for." "You are right, Saman. Wait for a moment." Kamaswamy left the room and returned with a scroll which he handed to his guest while asking, "Can you read this?" Siddharth looked at the scroll on which sales contract had been written down and began to read out its contents. "Excellent," said Kamaswamy. "And would you write something me for on this paper?" He handed him a piece of paper and a pen, and Siddharth wrote and returned the paper. Kumaraswamy read, "Writing is good, thinking is better, but being smart is good. Being patient is better." "It is excellent. How you are able to write," the merchant praised him. "Many a thing we will still have to discuss with one another. For today I am asking you to be my guest, to live in this house." Siddharth thanked and accepted, and lived in the dealer's house from now on. Clothes were brought to him and shoes, and every day the servant prepared a bath for him twice a day. A plentiful meal was served, but Siddharth only ate once a day, and ate neither meat nor did he drink wine. Kamaswamy told him about his trade, showed him the merchandise and the storage rooms, showed him calculations. Siddharth got to know many new things. He heard a lot and spoke little. And thinking of Kamla's word, he was never subservient to the merchant, forced him to treat him as an equal, yes, even more than an equal. Kamaswami conducted his business with care and often with passion, but Siddharth looked upon all of this as if it was a game, the rules of which he tried hard to learn precisely, but the contents of which did not touch his heart. He was not in Kamaswami's house for long when he already took part in landlord's business. But daily, at the hour appointed by her, he visited beautiful Kamla, wearing pretty clothes, fine shoes, and soon he bought her gifts as well. Much he learned from her red, smart mouth. Much he learned from her tender, supple hand. Him who was, regarding love, still a boy and had a tendency to plunge blindly and insatiably into lust like into a bottomless pit. Him she taught thoroughly, starting with the basics about the school of thought, which teaches that pleasure cannot be taken without giving pleasure, and that every gesture, every caress, every touch, every look, every spot of the body, however small it was, had its secret, which would bring happiness to those who know about it and unleash it. She taught him, and lovers must not part from one another after celebrating love, without one admiring the other, without being just as defeated as they have been victorious. So that with none of them should start feeling fed up or bored and get that evil feeling of having abused or having been abused. Wonderful hours he spent with the beautiful and smart artist became her student, her lover, her friend. Here with Kamla was the worth and purpose of his present life, knit with the business of Kamaswami. The merchant passed to duties of writing important letters and contracts on to him, and got into the habit of discussing all important affairs with him. He soon saw that Siddharth knew a little about rice and wool, shipping and trade, but that he acted in a fortunate manner, and that Siddharth surpassed him. The merchant in calmness and in the art of listening and deeply understanding previously unknown people. This is Brahman, he said to a friend, is no proper merchant and will never be one. There is never any passion in his soul when he conducts our business, but he has that mysterious quality of those people to whom success comes all by itself. Whether this may be a good star of his birth, magic, or something he has learned among the servants, he always seemed to be merely playing without business affairs, but never fully become a part of him. They never rule over him. He is never afraid of failure. He is never upset by a loss. The friend advised the merchant, give him from the business. He conducts for you a third of the profit, but let him also be liable for the same amount of the losses. When there is a loss, then he will become a zealous. Kumar Swami followed the advice, but Siddharth cared little about this. When he made a profit, he accepted it with equanimity. When he made losses, he laughed and said, well, look at this. So this one turned out badly. It seemed indeed as if he did not care about the business. At one time, he traveled to a village to buy a large harvest of rice there. But when he got there, the rice had already been sold to another merchant. Nevertheless, Siddharth stayed for several days in the village, treated the farmers for a drink, gave copper coins to their children, joined the celebration of a wedding, and returned extremely satisfied from his trip. Kumar Swami held against him that he had not turned back right way, that he had wasted time and money. Siddharth answered, stop scolding, my dear friend. Nothing was never achieved by scolding. If a loss has occurred, let me bear that loss. I am very satisfied with this trip. I have gotten to know many peoples of kind. A Brahmin has become my friend. Children have sat on my knees. Farmers have shown me their fields. Nobody knew that I was a merchant. That's all very nice, exclaimed Kumar Swami indignantly. But in fact, you are a merchant after all. One ought to think, or might you have only travelled for your amusement? Surely, Siddharth laughed. Surely I have travelled for my amusement. For what else? I have gotten to know people and places. I have received kindness and trust. I have found friendship. Look, my dear, if I had been Kumar Swami, I would have travelled back, being annoyed in a hurry, as soon as I had seen that my purchase had been rendered impossible. At time and money would indeed have been lost, but like this, I had a few good days. I have learned, had joy. I am neither harmed nor by others' annoyance and hastiness. And if I will return there again, perhaps to buy upcoming harvest or for whatever purpose it might be, friendly people will receive me in a friendly and happy manner, and I will praise myself for not showing any hurry and displeasure at that time. So leave it as it is, my friend, and don't harm yourself by scolding. If the day will come when you will see the Siddharth is harming me, then speak a word and Siddharth will go on his path. But until then, let's be satisfied with one another. Futile were also the merchant's attempt to convince Siddharth that he should eat his bread. Siddharth ate his own bread, or rather, they both ate other people's bread. All people's bread. Siddharth never listened to Kamaswami worries, and Kamaswami had many worries. Whether there was a business deal going on which was a danger of failing, or whether a shipment of merchandise seemed to have been lost, or a debater seemed to be unable to pay, Kamaswami could never convince his partner that it would be useful to utter a few words of worry, of anger. To have wrinkles on the forehead, to sleep badly. When one day Kamaswami held against him that he had learned everything he knew from him, he replied, "Would you please not kid me with such jokes? What I had learned from you is how much a basket of fish cost and how much interest may be charged on loaned money. These are your areas of expertise. I haven't learned to think from you, my dear Kamaswami. You ought to be the one seeking to learn from me." Indeed, his soul was not with the trade. Business was good enough to provide him with money for Kamla, and it earned him much more than he needed. Besides from this, Siddharth's interest and curiosity was only concerned with the people whose business, crafts, worries, pleasure, and acts of foolishness used to be as alien and distant to him as the moon. However, easily he succeeded in talking to all of them, in living with all of them, in learning from all of them. He was still aware that there was something which separated him from them, and this separating factor was him being Saman. He saw mankind going through life in a childlike or animal-like manner, which he loved and also despised at the same time. He saw them toiling, saw them suffering and becoming grey for the sake of things which seemed to him to entirely unworthy of this price, for money, for little pleasures, for being slightly unhonored. He saw them scolding and insulting each other. He saw them complaining about pain at which Saman would only smile, and suffering because the deprivations which a Saman would not feel. He was open to everything. These people bought his way. Welcome was the merchant who offered him linen for sale. Welcome was the debtor who sought another loan. Welcome was the beggar who told him for 1 hour the story of his poverty, and who was not half as poor as any given Saman. He did not treat the rich foreign merchant any different than the servant who shaved him and the street vendor whom he let cheat him out of some small change when buying bananas. When Kamaswami come to him to complain about his worries or to reproach him concerning his business, he listened curiously and happily was puzzled by him. tried to understand him, consented that he was a little bit right, only as much as he concerned indispensable, and turned away from him towards the next person who would ask for him, and there were many who came to him, many to do business with him, many to cheat him, many to draw some secret out of him, many to appeal to his sympathy, many to get his advice. He gave advice, he pitied, he made gifts, he let them cheat him a bit. And this entire game and the passion with which all people played this game occupied his thoughts just as much as gods and Brahmin used to occupy them. At times he felt deep in his chest a dying, a quiet voice which admonished him quietly, lamented quietly. He had perceived it. And then, for an hour, he became aware of strange life he was leading, of him doing lots of things which were only a game, of though being happy and feeling joy at times, real life still passing him and not touching him. As a ball player plays with his balls, he played with his business deal and with the people around him, watched them, found amusement in them. With his heart, with the source of his being, was not with them. The source ran somewhere far away from him, ran and ran invisibly, had nothing to do with his life anymore, and had several times he had suddenly become scared on an account of such thoughts, and wished that he would also be gifted with the ability to participate in all of this childlike naive occupation of daytime with passion and with his heart, really to live, really to act, really to enjoy, and to live instead of just standing as a spectator. But again and again, he came back to beautiful Kamla, learned the art of love, practiced the cult of love and lust, in which more than in anything else giving and taking becomes one, chatted with her, learned from her, gave her advice, received advice. She understood him better than Govinda, used to understand him. She was more similar to him. Once he said to her, "You are like me, you are different from most people. You are Kamla, nothing else. And inside of you, there's a peace and refuge to which you can go at every hour of the day and be at home at yourself. I can also do. Few people have this, yet all could have it." "Not all people are smart," said Kamla. "No," said Siddharth. "That's not the reason. Kamaswami is just as smart as I am, and still has no refuge in himself. Others have it, who are small children with respect to their mind. Most people, Kamla, are like a falling leaf, which is blown in the torn around through the air and waves, and tumbles to the ground. But others, few, are like stars. They go on a fixed course, on wind reaches them. In themselves, they have their law and their courses. Among all the learned men and sermons of which I knew many, there was one of this kind, a perfected one. I will never be able to forget him. It is that Gautam, the exalted one, who is spreading that teachings. Thousands of followers are listening to his teachings every day, follow his instructions every hour, but they are falling leaves. Not in themselves, they have teaching and a law." Kamla looked at him with a smile. "Again you are talking about him," she said. "Again you are having a salmon's thought." Siddharth said nothing, and they played the game of love, one of the 30 and 40 different games Kamla knew. Her body was flexible like that of jaguar and like the bow of a hunter. He who had learned from her how to make love was knowledgeable of many forms of lust, many secrets. For a long time she played with Siddharth, enticed him, rejected him, forced him, embraced him, enjoyed his masterful skill, until he was defeated and rested exhausted by her side. The courtesan bent over him, took a long look at his face, at his eyes, which had grown tired. You are the best lover, she said thoughtfully, I ever saw you. You are stronger than others, more supple, more willing. You have learned my art well, Siddharth. At some time, when I'll be older, I would want to be your child, and yet, my dear, you have remained a Samal, and yet